name is James Mang'erere. I'm an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. I've been in practice for the last 27 years. I've been a mediator for the last 24 years. I'm a mediation trainer. I'm in the panel, the United Nations panel of mediators and the United Nations Ombudsman. I'm also a board member of the International Mediation Institute and also a distinguished fellow of the International Academy of Mediators. And I think most of my life I've been mediating. Well, when I was still a young lawyer, I would sometimes get frustrated when I go with my client to court and you find that the client has a very good case, but because of legal technicalities, you find that they lose their case. For example, a client has purchased a piece of land, built his own house, and just because of a very simple technicality, they lose their case and their land is taken. So I realized that litigation was not the way to resolve disputes. And also, if you look at our African culture, the fact is that we are very closely knit together. We want to solve our disputes without messing up our relationships. So we realize that when somebody wins a court case, then the relationship also comes to an end. And yet we live as social animals. So we realize there could be a better way of resolving conflicts than litigation. And that's what attracted me to mediation. Well, if we look around us, especially here in Africa, so many countries are in turmoil politically. So I've been called to some countries to mediate their disputes, and you find that people have lost their homes, they don't have anything to eat, just because they can't find peace. So in most of those countries where the situation is so dire, people need peace more than anything, because our political systems are mostly messed up. So when you go into a country where there is no peace, and you try your best to ensure that you restore peace, you give hope to the inhabitants of that country, especially women and children. This theme is very relevant, especially for us who are peacemakers, because when we create peace, we give people hope to keep living, and they can see the importance of living just because there is peace. Well, I will tell you two stories very briefly, which were very interesting. The first one is where I was appointed a mediator to resolve a dispute between the government and a group of people, a tribal group. This group of people, their livelihood, they depend on hunting. They hunt for wild animals. But the government wanted to open up the place so that they would change their way of subsistence into doing cash crops. These people in this clan refused. They said if they build a road towards that area, it will disrupt the ecosystem and their animals will run away. So they said, we don't need a road. We need our animals because this is our traditional way of feeding. The government forced this way into it and they started constructing a road, and there was a very serious civil war. In fact, most of the tractors were burned down, most of the drivers were killed, and the police officers couldn't get into that area. So I went in to resolve the dispute. And the people say they didn't want a person from that locality because of the issues to do with neutrality. And therefore, I was appointed because I was from outside the country. And I helped these people resolve that conflict. I had to identify what each person's interests were, what the interests of the government were, and eventually I reconciled those interests, and people were able to accept the construction of the road, but in an area away from the ecosystem where the animals lived. And therefore, the government managed to build this road, but did not disrupt the ecosystem. There was a consensus. People signed the agreement, they are happy, and they are living together side by side. I'm sure that's a very good story that I can tell about how mediation helped avert a catastrophe, which was going to be a serious civil war. That's one of them. The other one I did was between two countries that were almost fighting. They had soldiers on the border, And I stepped in. I was appointed by an international body to go and help resolve this dispute. When I got there in one of the towns in West Africa, the people who were there, both of them were distance apart. They didn't want to listen to each other. But I created an environment where representatives of both countries and representatives of the rebels who were also involved would sit down at the table, and we would, in a very organized environment, discuss the consequences of not agreeing. So there's what we call the BATNA, WATNA, and enlightening. I use very well what would happen what is the best that would happen if there was no agreement? What is the worst that would happen if there is no agreement? What would be the most likely thing that would happen if there is no agreement? And because of that, I took them slowly through the process of breaking impasse, and there was an agreement which averted a catastrophe, because a war between the two countries would have resulted in the death of almost 100,000 people, especially people who live at the border. So those are the two cases I can tell you which are really very interesting and where mediation really assisted a lot. In the year 2007, there was a post-election violence, after which my institution, together with the National Legal Aid and the European Union, I was given the task of training community elders on resolving conflicts. And as I was going around, people have different cultures. And I can tell you, culture really has a very serious impact on conflict resolution. There are some cultures where especially women cannot face the elders. If they are talking to the elders, they have to look away. If they look into the eyes of the elders, that's a sign of disrespect. And then some of them even do not allow women to present their cases before them. They need to look for a representative. Well, we found that such kind of culture can be a serious impediment to resolving conflict, especially if the person who is offended is a woman. And also, there are some cultures like in our country where we have the Maasai. In fact, Maasai, there are people who have trained as mediators, professional mediators. And these people cannot mediate the dispute in the community because the people of those cultures sometimes do not their culture does not recognize the leadership of women. And sometimes even children, young people. So culture can be a very serious impact. It's also on the issues to do on the way you approach the people. I went to the northern part of Kenya, where the way they welcome you is so unique that if you don't know how to respond to their welcome, you will lose the mediation. When you arrive at the scene of the dispute, you are welcomed with a lady who milks a goat and gives you the milk directly from the goat's udder for you to drink. If you reject that, you have rejected them. So if you don't understand the culture of these people and how to behave so that you can get into them and help them resolve conflict, that can also be a very serious impediment to conflict resolution. So every time I go to resolve disputes in East Africa and Central Africa, first of all, the first thing I have to look at is to understand what the culture of those people is, what they like, what they don't like, the ways of communication, how you greet them, and whether there are some cultures where apology itself is an abomination. And you know how important apology is when we are doing mediation. So it's very careful to ensure that you understand, first of all, how the people resolve their conflicts traditionally, and also what they like and what they don't like. So culture has a very powerful impact on conflict resolution, especially in our African communities. Mediation is the better option of resolving conflicts. If you look around, mediation is not only faster in resolving conflicts, it's also affordable, and it's also it improves relationships. And therefore, for those people who are Christians, we are told that my people perish because of lack of knowledge. People have always believed that the only way to resolve conflict is through litigation. That's why you hear everybody say, see you in court. They do not know that there is a better way of resolving conflicts faster, cheaply, and in a way that maintains relationships. And that's why in this month of justice and peace, the message that we want the world to know is that there is a better way of resolving conflicts. far much better than litigation, and that is through mediation, which is assisted negotiation.